I'm Vanessa Avery. I'm the Executive Director of Sharing Sacred Spaces, and our organization brings people together across difference through dialogue, education, and hospitality, and most uniquely through the medium of architecture. For this series, we ask the guiding question: how do space and culture interact? I'm so pleased to welcome architect Mr. William Stanley III, focused on the concept of total design and the integration of planning, architecture, and interiors. The firm's achievements range from designing award-winning projects such as the Olympic Aquatic Center at the Georgia Institute of Technology and the Ebenezer Baptist Church, to being the recipient of numerous community and professional service citations. I'm overjoyed you're here with us. Thank you so much. I'm also overjoyed to introduce Dr. Michale Crosbie, who will be interviewing our guest today. Dr. Michale Crosbie is Professor of Architecture at the University of Hartford in Connecticut. He has served as the editor-in-chief of Faith and Form, the interfaith journal on religion, art, and architecture since 2001. Dr. Crosbie is a registered architect, and to my great delight, he also serves on the board of Sharing Sacred Spaces. Dr. Crosbie, I'll turn the stage to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for that introduction. And I'm very, very excited that we have Bill with us today. A few years ago, we had a really wonderful conversation in your office. And at that time, you and Ivan, you talked about your practice as a ministry, which I thought was rather fascinating. I had never talked to an architect before who had described their practice in architecture as a form of ministry. And that sort of leads me to a question: how did you and Ivan gravitate your work towards sacred space and sacred buildings?
A long story. We were both children who were raised in the church with secular parents, but they were also very actively involved in our church.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, secularly, they weren't preachers. One of my aunts, my aunt, we had a blended family, so my aunt was the de facto preacher of sorts. She went on to become the president of the Women's Auxiliary of the National Baptist Convention. So she made speeches all over the world and considered herself to be of the cross. But we were still very, very real-time, down-to-earth, in-the-world people. But one of the defining ideas of this whole notion of church and space and why you want to do it was that my church was the victim of the Eisenhower Expressways, which grew and quartered many Black communities and tore up many beautiful structures. So we raised it, grown up in this little church that was handmade, but it was really exquisitely made because we had craftsmen in the building, in the church there. And of course, it was torn down.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to find another place to go. So we found a school, we were in a school, and we found this large piece of land that was very prominent in a newly designed public housing project. At the time, it was market rate housing, so it wasn't like a public housing project per se. Mm-hmm. But I could just say that this experiencing this building being designed, and it was designed by G. Lloyd Preacher. And G. Lloyd Preacher was, how can I say it? My registration number is 2920, which is a very low number for the state of Georgia.
Yeah.
But Preacher's number was number 1. He designed Atlanta City Hall. He was a silk-tied buckhead architect, very well positioned in the community. And some of the businessmen in our church, of which there were just a few, were able to convince him that he should design our church. And I'm fairly certain that he had a church in the box somewhere. He brought it out and said, we can trim this off a little bit. This would work well for these Negroes, and probably these colors is what they call us back in those days. And it would have been fine. And it was fine, but just seeing that church, the grandeur of the building, the height of the steeple, the structural system was amazing to me. And so I would break out of this school after Sunday school, which is why people had eyes on you. And I'd run down the street on Sunday mornings to watch this church. And they weren't working on Sundays back in those days, but I would break in. I'd cut a hole in the fence or find a way to get in. I'd climb in and look at the drawings and climb around on the scaffolding and that kind of thing, to see the plastering, see the windows and everything that came together, the brick masonry. Of course, my mother had a house designed for us and built, so I knew what architecture and construction were like firsthand from being a little boy.
Mhm.
This was a different thing. This was the biggest building I guess I suppose I had been involved with. And I know that the church was going to be magnificent. It still, I think, has the largest steeple in the community. And so just that experience of being there over a period of time and being given permission to lie on Sunday and say, yes, I heard the sermon, I was there, and they knew full well that I couldn't have come back as sweaty as I was from crawling around with dust on me, from doing anything other than being out of that church. But it was formative, and it was a very important thing for me to do. So fast forward to having some other experiences with building growing up. I said, there's something unique about these spaces, because what I recognized was two things. Number one, the church was a place for outreach. That church was a meeting hall. That church was where people had the Christmas Carol concerts, the baccalaureate services for several high schools. When the community came together to meet, it was, 650 seats, biggest place in the community other than the gym of the high school, which is probably half that size. And so, and a place, and it was air conditioned, for Christ's sake. So what do? You open it up, and people understand that this is a place of worship and a place of assembly, and a very fine place, a very important place for the community. So, and we attracted a lot of people into that building because we had a lot of outreach programs, everything the children were doing. And it made a difference, I think, in a lot of folks in that community, moving out of public housing, moving into market rate housing, or around the area. They started to build new homes because they had this feeling of uplift. This was not a social church. This was not a church that had lawyers and doctors. We had basically school teachers who had grown up in that church and gone to Marsh Brown College and places like that.
Yeah.
Just working class people.
Yeah.
But it was wonderful experience to see them and to have I'm going to run and grab a picture right now. And this is my dad's Sunday school class in front of the old church, the T.H. Chandler's Bible class.
Wow.
And these old men were formidable, and they built the church that they're standing in front of.
Yeah.
They were the ones who stood behind the building of the new church. So huge undertaking financially, a massive effort, and it changed a lot of lives.
Yeah.
As you look at two things that Black communities are able to do, we're able to do churches, and we're able to do universities and schools. That's about the biggest effort that we've ever been able to put forth that talks about our experience and our expression is that.
Yeah.
We don't build country clubs. We don't build huge office buildings. We don't build towers. Symbols of that kind of civilization, but we do honor and understand the importance of the outreach in these churches. So they're multi-purpose buildings.
Every congregation you work with is like a family, right? I mean, they've got their history. They have their emphasis on certain things and as part of their worship experience. And you and Ivan, I know, have been very, very attentive to making sure that gets expressed in the buildings that you design.
Well, when you design a church, you join the church essentially.
Good.
I mean, you basically join that church.
Yeah.
You're one with the pastor. You're one with the trustees. You're one with certain other vocal people in the congregation.
Yeah.
We've always known somebody in every church we've done. Somebody who sits by the door, who's not one of the loudest voices, but somebody who will whisper in your ear and let you know what the real deal is on the church politics. And there are tremendous politics in any church building project. People always have their own ideas about how things should play out. We're doing a church now in Atlanta that has the same kind of political emphasis on what it does and how it does it, and it also has a budget to go along with it. So once you've been inside that zone and you know the workings of a church, you know that everything that you hear has to be tempered with some thought process that says, do they really want to do this? Are they really committed to this?
Yes.
Does this really make sense for them? How do we express their greatest expectations in the design of this building? It's permanent. It's going to be here in its form, hopefully, for generations. It is something that will have to be renewed and refurbished over time. But how do you capture that moment for them so that every time they come back for the christening of their grandchildren, the baptism of their great-grandchildren,
Yeah.
and still remember that experience that they had when they were young in that church. You're born there and you die there.
Yeah.
The best way for me to describe it.
Yeah.
Because you're born there and you die there, a certain amount of your life is invested in it. So that's why we said we kind of join them.
So tell me a little bit about this. This is probably one of your most important commissions ever.
Oh, it is. It is. There's no question about it. It's the iconic Ebenezer Baptist Church, which is a church of Dr. King. Actually, Dr. King's home church is across the street.
Uh-huh.
My father was born on Auburn Avenue in 1900, which is right down the street from this building. My grandparents came to Atlanta University in 1890. My grandmother taught at Marshtown College, which was around the corner.
Mhm.
And my father was a contemporary of Dr. King's mother.
I see.
So they were formidable in that community from day one. They owned land, they had presence, they had money. They were stewards of the community. They made sure that the uplift was profound. And what we found is that there were 3 or 4 major churches on Auburn Avenue. Mother Bethel, Big Bethel AME Church, which is where Morris Brown was founded. Big Rock Church, Ebenezer, and then around the corner was another church, my aunt's church, which was Mount Zion Second Baptist Church. And so all of them had this grandeur.
Yeah.
I mean, they were fine churches.
Yeah.
They were built for Sunday worship. They were revered, and these preachers would come together on Sunday, and they would out-preach each other. They wouldn't duel, but you got the word by 4 o'clock who out-preached who, whose sermon was the most powerful. So anyway, Ebenezer already had an aura, and because we were building this church initially next to the existing building, educational building, that was where he had his last birthday party before he died.
Wow.
We were scrambling. We had to scrap those plans, take the essence of those plans, which were much more Gothic, and try to transfer them to a new site, which is across the street. So,
yeah,
an act of Congress, John Lewis was able to make a swap to allow for National Park Services to exhibit and interpret the old church in exchange for property that was owned by the Civic Atlanta Library, in exchange for us being able to put the building here. We had many, many conversations about this notion of Afrocentricity and why it was important that people understand that church started long before we were in this country. This building is like the Great House, the Long House, the hut, if you will, where a number of people come together spiritually. This is viewed from the balcony. It shows the structural bents that are cast down to the ground, and that gives it a wide open space, the sort of central worship space in the middle there, and the use of woods and glass and natural colors to sort of reflect back on what happens in African spaces like that. And the skylight in the middle is intended to bring in air, bring in light, but also is used to vent these houses. These great houses in Africa have to have a space so the air can circulate out. So the air comes in, it circulates out. And we, at one point in time, were planning to stain the glass of the windows. And Dr. Roberts said, well, this is such a wonderful light-filled space. It even works for television. We dare not put the stained glass on these windows. We want it to be open. We want people to be able to see in and see out.
Yeah.
And to see the changes in spirit and changes in mood from one side to the other. So everything is sort of worked so that if you're a worshiper, you don't see the air, you don't see the lights. You experience them, but they're behind the vents. And so the structural vents carry all of this load out. And the curvature is responsive to what we know to be a natural type of shape in an African building.
Now, these are some images that you found partly inspirational, right, for this project?
Right, absolutely. You look at thatching, and of course, I worked in Ireland a number of years ago. Actually, in 1969, I was an exchange student, and thatching was still a very, very logical way to cover a building.
Yeah.
And this is thatching, and this is thatching held up by posts, and those posts have inscriptions on them. Those inscriptions have meaning, and some of the glyphs that you see are responsive to the culture. So we said maybe what we should do is to try to replicate that thatching by having something that looks like thatching when it's patina. So we put a copper roof on. We turn a gray shade of green or bluish green. And so that's our response to what a building would look like, what the roofing would look like on a building in a natural environment.
And then this is, I find this a really interesting connection here. Talk a bit about these columns in the back of the church.
Well, the columns are like the columns that you just saw. They hold up the roof. They give you an opportunity to have clear span, right?
Yeah.
And the columns have something on at the base, something that talks about. So Ebenezer is a church for all nations, right? And what you see here are different kinds of glyphs. The first on the left is the typical Anglican cross.
This one here. Yep.
Yes, the first one, and then the next one over, you're seeing the reverse of a Coptic cross.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Reverse of a Coptic cross. The next one is another Coptic cross turned on end.
Mm-hmm.
A different design, and then the next one after that is actually a design from the Dogon in Africa, but it's also very similar to the design of the organ covers at the old church. That image manifests itself throughout the building. It manifests itself. As a matter of fact, Senator Warnock decided he needed to have a smaller bookboard. He needed to have something more transparent for his podium, his lecture. And he uses that symbol to build one, to have one sculpted out of bronze. So that symbol manifests itself in a number of places around. It becomes a glyph of the church because it blends the old with the new, with an interpretation of something that is really quite ancient. And so each tells a different story about the church and about the church's engagement with other churches. Because Ebenezer is that church because of Dr. King that said, anybody who comes in here can join, can be an associate member. People come in by the busload, you know. And Ebenezer is not a high church, it's a Baptist church, but it has a certain structure and way to form itself. But you see people coming in from the country, tourists, you know, on buses, they're coming in, they'll join right there on the spot.
Yeah.
And they'll say, and it's an in-town church, which opens itself up to people and becomes very warm and very, very opening. So that's how that comes together. And of course, we had a responsibility to the National Historic Preservation Societies that we needed to have something that reflected the community. So there's a slightly broken arch, a Gothic arch that's reflective of the old building that you see on the outside. That form itself also manifests. It's not a new form, and it's not a necessarily Eurocentric form that's cast in Roman Catholicism. It is something that you see. You see these arches everywhere. You see these forms everywhere. So that's why those are as they are. But this is a city hall. This is a place where when Barack Obama was elected president, everybody came. And they were jumping up and down on the pews and so on. They're going to break the pews. The Atlanta Symphony Orchestra plays here. They have a flexible pulpit that allows you to take the rail down between the choir and the pulpit and allow for that to be a much larger space. Community choirs, dances go on, and there people dance, and incantation and dance is also a very important part of the way we worship. I mean, people move around and not inside the Black church. They are not static.
Yeah.
It's not a conga line, but there are ways that people, cross their feet and dance, and when the Spirit hits them, they do what's natural.
Yeah.
And the incantation and dance is very important.
Yeah.
And the way that one expresses himself in a building like this is also very important. We harken back to those materials that you would see in an African environment by making sure that they, you can sort of see that form again.
Yeah, this
grasses,
is kind of an amazing connection here.
Well, it's intentional.
Yeah.
This obelisk in the back, that long, tall item there to the right of the screen.
Yeah.
You'll see something similar to that as a part of the bell tower, which is like the stele at Axum.
Right there.
Yeah, and it has a hat on it, but it also has that lift, that form again. So the verticality of it is very important. Of course, we had to have a structural member to hold up that front of the building, and big structural members. We just made it into a cross and put reflective glass on it so you see it. At sometimes of the day it looks like glass, other times of the day it reflects a cross. So we made sure that we work these elements into the building. And there it is, the front.
Exactly.
In an earlier view, it's much more developed now in terms of all the things that happen. But but it needed to be open. It needed to be open and honest and free so that people can come and go. This is the Lighthouse Catholic Student Center over at Atlanta University, and it's actually two buildings blended as one. The building on the left is the chapel, the church, for the Newman House, and the Newman House is a Catholic tradition for universities.
Yes.
This particular group, when I first met them, had an Ethiopic Coptic sort of symbol as a part of what they were all about. And I wondered about that. Of course, they explained to me that the eunuch took Christianity down to Ethiopia, and it was the oldest continuous Christian church that in existence. So I thought about that. So well, that makes some sense, you know. And so why wouldn't we try to express that in the building itself?
Yeah. And then, so this is St.
George's Church is carved out of solid rock down into a hole. And of course, there is a monk, a priest who sits inside that building all the time. And it has a solid roof. It has these little windows where sunlight can pierce in, but he's there. And it is said that he guards the temple. So this solid rock building that's been hewn, but also ground and polished and decorated. It's a very interesting structure.
Yeah.
And decided that we could do the same thing with poured concrete. Heavily rusticate the concrete. We would make these forms, and we would create these windows and doorposts and those kinds of things that express that same thing. And so when you see the building in its original form now, and you see the building, and it weathers over time. You see the other building, the one in Atlanta, just weathering the same way.
Yeah.
There's a certain import to what we're doing. Of course, now the building next to it is glass, and it's gray brick to catch the same materiality is similar to, but it's intentionally very stark and sort of modernist building because it's a library, it's a community, it's a priest residence above and a guest house for visiting priests. It has a kitchen, it has a number of secular activities go on in there because there are Catholic students in the University Center who don't go home for the holidays.
Yeah.
They're from the islands and they're from South America. And so this becomes the place where they gather. They were able to stay in dormitories over Thanksgiving, some even over Christmas. But this place is open for them to come in and have their meals and party and sleep and dance and, you know, that kind of thing, whatever they want to do. And there's an outdoor patio. So it's a very well used building. But it also is appropriate for church services on Sunday. In the life of this particular community, and you can see the rustication and the way that we reversed the banding.
Yeah,
we actually handled the scuppers to remove the water off the roof. It's the same use of the icons of the old building, but in a reversed manner so that we could actually form it. And it's pretty true to perform. I don't know if there's another poured concrete structure like this. But you can see that it manifests itself again in the windows, which we added more of. And these windows were created by a priest. Actually, he's a monk at the monastery in Conyers. A guy who a former Marine. Actually, what he does is he burns the glass that he makes to create these forms on the window. So all these are Coptic forms. The crosses that you see there.
Yeah.
I bought those and put them in the church for this picture and for this ceremony. You can sort of see the furniture. We designed the furniture for all the buildings that we do. So we designed the pulpit, both the lecterns, the tables, and kneelers and everything in there is reflective of the same kind of architecture that you see in the building, and it worked out very well. These chairs can be moved around. They can have other kinds of services in there, but it is open and welcoming to any of the students, whether they're Catholic or not, in Atlanta University Center.
Is this a font here at the bottom?
Yes, it's an Embo, yes.
Okay.
It's called the Embo. And it's used. And of course, you see one of the stations of the cross, the other stations of the cross are not, I guess this picture was made, they were not put on the wall there yet. But they're very rustic. They're made of the same kind of materials. We were very cautious to find the fabric for the chairs that was, again, reflective of what you might have seen in the Coptic area in Ethiopia.
Can you talk a little bit about this project here?
Yeah, this is a church that we did for Turner Chapel AME Church. And Turner Turner Chapel AME Church is named for Henry McNeil Turner, who was the second generation of African-American bishops in the AME Church. He was political. He believed in truthful gospel, which meant that he was less Episcopal and more gospel-centered in the way in his preaching. There was a lot of outreach in what he did. He was really what we call a race man, somebody who was really actively involved in the uplift of the building, the church, and the community. Well, the man who designed this church for the pastor, who is now since passed away, Marcus. Dr. Marcus was from Trinidad and Tobago, and he told us, in certain terms, I grew up in high church, but I don't want a high church. The episcopacy is really, really powerful in the islands, particularly if they're British Isles.
Right.
And that's where everybody goes. But he was AME, which meant he worshiped in a different type of church, but he was impacted by what this type of church down there did. So we did probably 13 different designs on this building. Wow. And ended up with this one because it expressed the power and the openness that he wanted to have displayed on this parcel of land, a very prominent parcel in Marietta. Marietta had been a divided community for a long time. What he wanted to say is you can enter this church from any number of directions. And so you see the center of the church is it's a sanctuary.
Yeah.
There's a chapel on the side, a very beautiful day chapel. There's an educational building on the back and the lower level. It's a very compact church, but it has a number of different forms that it sort of draws the community in. This is that's actually the day chapel right there.
I see.
So the day chapel has a prominence all its own. I wish we had an interior view of it, but you'll see it at some point. That's the way it works. And so, very actively involved church. I mean, it is beautiful in many ways. It expresses the dynamics of that community, which had been divided for a long time into a small Black community and a very large, extremely conservative white community in Marietta, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
That balance has started to change something, but this was undeniably the biggest building by African Americans in that area ever in the history of Marietta or Northwest Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
So it's drawn a lot of people into it. They really feel comfortable in what they do there. And this is the interior of it. You can sort of see
amazing.
How we raised the choirs and the band. He was a calypso guitar player, so the music was extremely important to him. So making sure that the musicians were in the right place and the celebrants were in the right place. He just moved around in different places throughout the church, playing his guitar and singing and preaching. And these icons are very important. So in the mornings you can hear, you can see the sun rising, in the evening you see the sun setting. And
wow.
the crest from one side is going to the other. It's important to us that buildings not be black box theaters or television stations. I mean, why not have, be able to see it raining outside?
Yeah.
They've been in there sometimes, say they can see the lightning flashing behind, and just about the time that the preacher's talking about, they're not hellfire and brimstone, but something responsible. So the environment is in touch with what you do as a church,
right?
What you do inside the church. That's a very big choir, and there are a lot of opportunities. I've performed in there myself with my choir, former choir.
Huh.
So you have a lot of community activities going in this building. Again, when something very important happens in Marietta and that part of the town, they come right here to this church.
Yeah.
This is one of the biggest churches in African Methodism.
What is this space? How many people does this seat?
I think 1,800, and you've got a choir. Your choir set is 250 people.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big choir. That's
a
lot of voices. That's
very powerful.
It's Mormon tabernacle size, and they can put a full orchestra in front too, and really blow you out of there. In terms of just what they can create in there. But they have dances, they have dancing, they have incantation. Again, this is theater, this is ballet.
Yeah.
At a church. And that's exactly what it should be. It should be a place that allows for the open expression and the worship of God in any manner that's appropriate. And these houses allow you to do that. But this is St. Paul's Episcopal Church.
Okay.
And it's a church that we built inside a church. We had to tear down a portion of an educational building and fit a sanctuary inside that church. So the reason that you see these clerestory windows up here is because we had to bring light in from above into that church. This is the bell tower to the left. This is a front yard here going in, and this is actually to the left is an entrance, the main entrance into the sanctuary. So you enter the sanctuary on the side.
Yeah.
You walk around it, yes. But there's another entrance on the parking slot side that you can enter as well. So you come in and you circulate around to the door inside that you want to go into.
I see.
The access is not driven by a strong symmetry, although it does face east as is appropriate and as is required for an Episcopal church.
This wall here is it this wall or the one at the other end?
The one at the other end was the one that has the windows in it.
Okay.
That one simply has a rose window in it, and it is stained and shows a different image. Mm-hmm. And so we've installed, and these windows now have stained glass on them. The upper parts of them. The lower parts, however, still allow for you to see the dogwoods bloom in the springtime and the snow in the wintertime. That little stuff we get. But these clerestory windows above bring light in from different directions into the sanctuary.
Those are up in here.
Yes, up in the clerestory, yes. And we had a pipe organ was built to fit this space, and the choir is much smaller. The kneelers are appropriate; it can be moved around. Mm-hmm. And there's also a baptismal pool. I'm sorry, down in the floor of the pulpit, so you can actually lift the top and go down and be baptized.
Oh,
yes. And when the bishop came to open the church, he said he wanted to see it. So he said, "Oh yeah," and he got in and said, "We started singing Wade in the Water." I mean, the jazz version of it, as a matter of fact.
Uh-huh.
Interesting because it does allow for a different expression of the tenets of Episcopal Church, in a new modern expression.
Yeah.
Imagine that this building to the side over here, on the right-hand side, is an old building, and we came in and we sort of fashioned a new building within it. This is one on a college campus, same university campus. This is Absalom Jones Canterbury Center. Mm-hmm. The Canterbury Center is a church for Episcopal students. On Fridays at 1 o'clock, the Canterbury Center loans its space to the imam, and the Muslims have their service.
Oh, really? Huh.
Yes. That happens in a community that is ecumenical. We decided that we needed to make it open. This building that we're looking at in the foreground actually is where the meeting areas are, the offices. The dormers up top of where were designed for dormitories, for apartments.
Yeah.
And the chapel on the end down there is a very interesting sort of play on window types, and to sort of make the building a fun place for students to worship, and to have their meetings, and to move the chairs out and have a dance if they want to.
Yeah.
Or to have a supper in the little portico there.
Yeah.
Very lively space. Because you can imagine that on a church, on a campus that is largely Baptist and Methodist.
Yeah.
Two major religions. There's not a strong Catholic presence. There's not a strong Episcopal church presence. But when you place important buildings that have strength in important locations on those campuses, it says this is a welcoming place.
Yeah.
That's your religion. Then that's what and so you have a lot of kids who come in from the coast, where there are strong traditions that are not Baptist and they're not Protestant, and they enjoy it. And so what we have here is a building, and we did the furniture inside to make sure we did it in the previous one as well, so that we can see what it looks like when we're having a worship service. But it also allows for them to have different kinds of activities inside. So the windows, sometimes we get a candle in at Christmas time and look really interesting from the outside. This building has the fluidity, if you will, and it's flexible so that you can do pretty much anything you want to.
I have a question about the exterior of this building, which I find really kind of interesting. The way you've used this brick in a way it's banding around the building. Where did that come from? That that use of the bands in the brick, the different brick.
If you look carefully at the band, you not only see the bands in the brick, but you see the decoration of the brick at the end wall.
This one here.
They go up to the top there, where they go up a little high.
Up here?
Into the gable end.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that it's not just banding, it's decoration. I'm from a family of Masons.
Yeah.
I'm the kid who did not want to be outside in the heat. I did not want to have the concrete or the mud, as we call it, to chap my hands and peel all the skin off. So after maybe a week of that activity, it was over for me. I said, I'll go back to shining shoes or something. I'm not going to be outside. I can draw. I'll figure out another way to join you guys. And they all made great money as Masons, because they were excellent at it.
Yeah.
But that whole notion of how you handle masonry never left me. And what you do in using brick, I use a lot of brick in our buildings.
Yeah.
To express oneself and paint with brick. And so that's what this is. This is a painting, a striping, a painting with brick and glass all the way around the building using some very basic forms.
Yeah.
The gable end.
I love the way you've incorporated these crosses into the brick banding.
That's intentional, yes.
Very subtle, but and then when you use these glass blocks for these tiny windows, right, you incorporate a cross in those as well. We see that here from the inside.
Right.
All those are very, very subtle ways of reiterating why we're here, right?
Remind them that this is a church.
Yeah.
Today, it has been commissioned, but it is a church that is down to earth. So this cross is this big, right?
Yeah.
This cross is this big because it's this 4 glass block, and you can put your hand on that. You can see how important it is. The other one is way up in the air. It's bigger and it's more profound, although it faces an alley, it faces a community now. But we want to be mindful. I mean, this college campus is a secular. Kids are walking around drinking beer and smoking weed and driving cars and rapping and doing all kinds of other stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And they are reminded all the time by these buildings of what their real purpose for being on campus is all about.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you will find is that none of these buildings have ever been attacked. There's never been any graffiti on any of them. There's never been any trash on the yard. None of that. They're still held in serious consideration as places of worship.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you said that the building was a symbol of saying you're welcome here to a minority population on a campus. Just struck by an architectural space as a symbol of hospitality. And I just wondered if you had anything more to add to that.
Well, I could say that as Black people, we've been shut out a lot already. We come from difficult environments, and when you arrive at a community that's supposed to be the precipice of learning, which is what the Atlanta University Center is, there's no place for anybody to be shut out or anybody to be marginalized. Mm-hmm. And so if there are not many Episcopalians around, which there aren't, because Anglicans tend to be more in the East Coast areas. And so what we need to do is to make sure that they understood that they're welcome, that this is apropos, that you came here to get an education, but you also came here to express your culture. If your culture could be expressive to you. So that is why that particular church, if you will, has services for Muslim students Friday at 1 o'clock. Mm-hmm. No questions asked, In fact, they were doing it in the old building. And it became such a tradition that it's just as important as jazz vespers on Sunday. It's just as important as, your kid's wedding on, right after they graduate. That's what they decide to do. Yeah. So we look for opportunities in this particular environment to encourage people. And it's always about encouragement. Because when you're a student, you're marginalized anyway. You don't have any money, you don't have any power, or your power is not perceived. Although the kids now do have a lot more than we had. I mean, they're driving around in BMWs and and Range Rovers and whatever because they're moneyed. But there are a lot of kids who don't have the money. They don't have it marginalized, and they seek other ways of expressing their import to somebody. And it's not about the things as much as it is about the people. And we know that if they're like me, because Georgia Tech was a very arid environment on Sundays, what you found were fraternity boys coming out of fraternity houses drunk, waking up from a hangover or something like that. And I'm scurrying off to go somewhere. So for 7 years on campus, I didn't go to church at all. I would visit my parents' church occasionally, but there was nothing around that was friendly for me on that campus. There's a very, very small minority of Black students on white campus. And so, although we would play the Baptist Student Union on Sundays in football and beat them to death as much as we possibly could, because they had a big, rough group of guys. But it was just the absence of anything other than secular on Sunday that was really astounding, and where this particular school is located, you don't have a major church right there in the center of campus. Mm-hmm. You have small chapels and small churches because they're basically church schools. And the chapel becomes a very important part of every one of these schools, and Danforth Chapel, and Sisters Chapel, then Lighthouse, then the Absolute Jones Canterbury Center. And somebody will find his way in one of those places. Mm-hmm. So welcome to college, but welcome to the place you can find your way.
We're really honored that you could be part of this series.
We enjoyed this immensely, and we'll happily come back at any time that you like to see more on the insides of more of the things we do.